Samantha, a struggling single mother, thought her day couldn't get any worse when the city's most notorious billionaire, Matthew Collins, sat in her section. He was cold, demanding, and refused to even look her in the eye. But the real heartbreak came when he walked out on a $400 bill, leaving exactly $0 for a tip. Tears stung her eyes as her cruel manager moved to fire her on the spot. But as Samantha cleared the empty table, her trembling fingers brushed against something taped beneath the dinner plate, a handwritten note that would reveal a secret so shocking it would bring the entire city to its knees and change her life forever. The rain in Seattle didn't just fall, it hammered against the glass windows of the Velvet Oak, a restaurant so exclusive that the scent of truffle oil and aged mahogany seemed to form a barrier against the common world outside. Inside, the air was warm and filled with the hushed, polite murmur of the city's elite. For Samantha Reed, the warmth was a luxury she couldn't afford to enjoy. Samantha adjusted her apron, wincing as the stiff fabric rubbed against her hip. She had been on her feet for 9 hours straight. Every step sent a jolt of pain up her calves, but she forced a smile onto her face. A smile was part of the uniform, just like the black vest and the polished shoes that were a size too small. "Table 4 needs water, Reed. Move it," snapped Gavin, the floor manager. Gavin was a man who wore suits that cost more than Samantha's car, yet he seemingly derived his only joy from tormenting the waitstaff. He knew Samantha was desperate. He knew about Leo. "On it, Gavin," Samantha whispered, grabbing a crystal pitcher. Her mind drifted to Leo, her 6-year-old son. He was currently with Mrs. Gable, the elderly neighbor who watched him for a fraction of what a daycare would charge. Leo had been born with a severe auditory processing disorder. The surgery to fix it wasn't covered by her basic insurance, and the specialist, Dr. Thorne, a name she hated seeing on bill headers, had given her a deadline. 2 months. If they didn't operate in 2 months, the hearing loss could become permanent. She needed $10,000. She had $300 in her bank account. The heavy oak doors of the restaurant swung open, letting in a gust of cold, wet wind and a hush that fell over the room faster than the rain outside. A man walked in. He was flanked by 2 security guards who looked like they were carved from granite. The man himself was older, perhaps in his late 60s, with silver hair swept back impeccably and a charcoal suit that fit him like a second skin. He leaned heavily on a cane, topped with a silver wolf's head. It was Matthew Collins. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. Matthew Collins wasn't just a billionaire. He was an institution. He owned half the skyline, the shipping docks, and arguably the mayor. He was known for 2 things: his ruthless business acquisitions and his utter disdain for incompetence. Gavin's face went pale. He practically sprinted to the host stand. "Mr. Collins, we didn't have a reservation on the books, but I don't need a reservation to eat in a building I own the mortgage on," Matthew said. His voice was like grinding gravel. "A quiet table, the corner, and I don't want a hovering vulture for a server. Give me someone who knows how to be invisible." Gavin swallowed hard, his eyes darting around the room. He saw the seasoned waiters, the ones who knew the wine list by heart. Then his eyes landed on Samantha. A cruel smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. If Collins was in a bad mood, he would tear the server apart. Gavin didn't want his best staff demoralized. He wanted a scapegoat. "Reed!" Gavin hissed, snapping his fingers. "You have table 7, the VIP." Samantha's heart dropped into her stomach. "Mr. Collins?" "Gavin, I've only been on the floor for 3 weeks. Maybe Timothy should—" "I said you," Gavin growled, shoving a leather-bound menu into her chest. "Mess this up, and don't bother coming in tomorrow." Samantha took a deep breath, clutching the menu. She thought of Leo's surgery. She thought of the eviction notice she had hidden in the kitchen drawer. She needed this job. She needed the tips. A billionaire like Collins could change her month with a single signature on a receipt. Or he could ruin her. She walked toward the corner table, her hands shaking slightly. Matthew Collins was already seated, staring out the window at the rain. He didn't look up as she approached. "Good evening, Mr. Collins," Samantha said, her voice steady despite her fear. "My name is Samantha, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. Can I start you with sparkling water? No ice, a slice of lemon on the side, not in the glass," he interrupted, still not looking at her. "And the ribeye, rare. If it's medium rare, I send it back. If it's blue, I send it back. Rare. And bring me the 82 Cabernet." "Yes, sir," Samantha said, writing furiously. "And Samantha," she froze. "Yes, sir?" He turned his head slowly. His eyes were a piercing, icy blue, surrounded by webs of wrinkles that spoke of a life spent scowling. "Do not ask me how the food is. Do not ask me if I need anything else. If I need you, I will signal. Otherwise, stay away from the table." "Understood," she whispered. She retreated to the kitchen, her heart pounding against her ribs. "He's a monster," Timothy, one of the bartenders, whispered as he handed her the bottle of wine. "Last time he was here, he made a waitress cry because the ice cubes clinked too loudly. Good luck, Samantha." Samantha took the wine. She didn't need luck. She needed a miracle. The next hour was an exercise in torture. Samantha performed her duties with surgical precision. She poured the wine without spilling a drop, ensuring the label faced him. She placed the lemon slice exactly 2 inches from the glass. When the steak came out, she checked it with the chef 3 times to ensure it was perfectly rare. Every time she approached the table, Matthew Collins acted as if she were a ghost. He didn't nod. He didn't say thank you. He didn't even acknowledge her presence. He simply ate, drank, and stared at a small leather notebook he had placed on the table. He looked lonely, Samantha thought. It was a strange thought to have about a man who could buy the entire block, but there was a heaviness to his shoulders. At one point, Leo's doctor called her cell phone. Samantha felt the vibration in her apron pocket. She knew she couldn't answer it on the floor, but panic flared in her chest. Was it an emergency? She glanced at Collins. He was cutting his steak. She ducked behind the service station and checked the text message. "Dr. Aris, we have a cancellation for next week. If you can come up with the deposit by Friday, we can slot Leo in early." Friday. That was in 2 days. The deposit was $2,500. She looked at her tips for the night. $40. She looked at Matthew Collins. His bill was already over $400. A 20% tip would be $80. A generous tip. Well, rumors said billionaires either tipped thousands or nothing. She prayed for the former. She walked back to the table to refill his wine. As she poured, Collins spoke, his voice low. "You have a child?" Samantha nearly dropped the bottle. "Excuse me, sir." "You smell like baby powder and cheap laundry detergent," he said, still looking at his notebook. "And you keep checking your pocket. Only mothers check their pockets with that look of panic." Samantha flushed, feeling exposed. "Yes, sir. A son." "He's 6. "Single?" "Yes, sir." "Humph." Collins took a sip of wine. "Hard life. Poor choices." The insult felt like a slap. Samantha gripped the wine bottle tighter. She wanted to scream at him. She wanted to tell him that her husband had died in a car accident 3 years ago, that she was working 2 jobs, that she was doing everything she could. But she swallowed her pride. She needed the tip. "I do my best, sir," she said softly. Your best is likely not enough, he muttered. Check, please. Samantha nodded, her throat tight. She printed the bill. The total was $485.50. She placed it in the leather folder and set it on the table. Collins produced a black credit card. He didn't look at it. He just slid it into the folder. Samantha ran the card. It was approved immediately. She returned with the slips, the merchant copy and the customer copy. Thank you, Mr. Collins, she said. He didn't respond. He took a gold pen from his pocket, scribbled on the receipt, stood up, grabbed his cane, and walked out of the restaurant without a backward glance. His security guards fell in step behind him. Samantha hurried to the table. Her hands were trembling as she opened the folder. She needed that tip. If he left even 20%, that was nearly $100. It was a start for the deposit. She looked at the receipt. Subtotal, $485.50. Tip, 0.200. Total, $485.50. On the signature line, he had signed with a jagged, aggressive scrawl, and below the tip line, he had written 2 words. Get a real job. Samantha felt the blood drain from her face. The room spun. 0. He had left 0. And the note. It was cruel. Unnecessarily cruel. Well, Gavin appeared behind her, snatching the folder from her numb hands. He looked at the receipt and let out a harsh, barking laugh. 0? He stiffed you? And told you to get a real job? Gavin waved the receipt in the air, attracting the attention of the other servers. Look at this, everyone. The billionaire thinks Reed is so incompetent he didn't leave a dime. I told you, Samantha, you aren't cut out for high-end dining. You belong in a diner flipping burgers. Please, Gavin, Samantha whispered, tears spilling over. I did everything right. Obviously not, Gavin sneered. Clear the table, then clock out. You're done. Don't come back tomorrow. You're firing me? Samantha gasped. But my son. Not my problem. Clear the table. Gavin threw the leather folder onto the dirty tablecloth and stormed off toward the kitchen. Samantha stood there, humiliated, the tears falling freely now. She was fired. She had no money for the deposit. Leo wouldn't get the surgery. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and began to clear the plates. She picked up the heavy dinner plate Collins had eaten from. As she lifted it, she saw it. Taped to the underside of the plate was a folded white napkin. It wasn't a standard restaurant napkin. It was thick, expensive linen, clearly brought from outside. It was taped securely with Scotch tape. Samantha frowned. She looked around. Gavin was yelling at the cooks. No one was watching. She peeled the tape back and unfolded the napkin. Inside, there was no cash. Her heart sank again. Just a piece of paper? But as she unfolded the linen completely, a small, heavy object fell out and clattered onto the tablecloth. It was a brass key, old-fashioned, with a complex head. And on the linen napkin, written in the same jagged handwriting as the receipt, was a message. But this time, the words weren't cruel. Samantha Reed, I saw how you held your tongue when I insulted you. I saw the fear in your eyes when your phone buzzed. I know you are drowning. The man who judges a book by its cover misses the story. I judged you, and you passed. Take this key. Go to 42 Hawthorne Lane. Tonight, tell no one. P.S. Look under the salt shaker. Samantha's breath hitched. She lifted the heavy crystal salt shaker. Sitting there, folded into a tiny square, was a check. She unfolded it, her fingers shaking so hard she nearly dropped it. It was a personal check from Matthew Collins. Pay to the order of Samantha Reed. Amount $10,000. $10,000. The exact amount she needed for the surgery. Samantha gasped, clapping a hand over her mouth to stifle a sob. She looked at the door where the old man had exited. Why? Why treat her like garbage and then do this? And what was at 42 Hawthorne Lane? "Reed, why is that table still dirty?" Gavin's voice boomed from across the room. Samantha quickly shoved the check, the key, and the napkin into her apron pocket. She grabbed the tray. "I'm clearing it now," she called back, her voice stronger than it had been all night. She wasn't just a waitress getting fired anymore. She was a woman with a key, a check, and a mystery that terrified and thrilled her. She was going to 42 Hawthorne Lane. The rain had turned into a torrential downpour by the time Samantha pulled her rusted Honda Civic into the driveway of Mrs. Gable's house. The windshield wipers slapped frantically against the glass, fighting a losing battle against the storm. Samantha sat in the idling car for a moment, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. In her pocket, the check for $10,000 felt like it was burning a hole through the fabric. It was real. She had checked it 3 times under the car's dome light. Matthew Collins, the man who had publicly humiliated her, had given her the lifeline she had prayed for. But why the game? Why the insult written on the receipt? And why the key? She ran into the house, thanked a sleepy Mrs. Gable, and bundled Leo into the back seat. Leo, wrapped in his favorite dinosaur blanket, didn't wake up. He couldn't hear the thunder, and without his hearing aids in, the world was a silent, peaceful place for him. Samantha looked at his sleeping face in the rearview mirror. His soft breathing was the only thing keeping her grounded. "I'm doing this for you, baby," she whispered. She put the car in gear. She wasn't going home. She was going to 42 Hawthorne Lane. Hawthorne Lane was located in the old money district of the city, a place where the driveways were long, the gates were iron, and the trees were older than the country itself. As Samantha drove deeper into the neighborhood, the streetlights became sparse, replaced by the warm, amber glow of gas lamps that lined the private roads. Her GPS announced, "You have arrived," just as she pulled up to a massive wrought-iron gate. Number 42 was not a modern mansion of glass and steel. It was a Gothic revival estate, looming dark and imposing against the stormy sky. Stone gargoyles perched on the pillars, staring down at her battered car with judgmental stone eyes. Samantha rolled down her window. There was no keypad, no intercom, just a keyhole embedded in the stone pillar of the gate. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She took the brass key Matthew had left in the napkin. Her hand trembled as she reached out into the rain and inserted the key. It turned with a satisfying, heavy click. Slowly, silently, the massive gates swung inward. Samantha drove through, the gravel crunching loudly under her tires. The driveway wound through a dense thicket of trees before opening up to reveal the house in its entirety. It was a fortress of dark brick and ivy. The windows were dark, save for one on the ground floor that glowed with a flickering orange light. She parked the car and killed the engine. Silence rushed back in, broken only by the rain. "Stay asleep, Leo," she murmured, draping her coat over him for extra warmth. She cracked the window an inch for air, locked the doors, and ran toward the massive oak front doors. She didn't need to knock. The door was unlocked. Samantha pushed it open and stepped into a foyer that smelled of old paper, beeswax, and wood smoke. It was a cavernous space with a grand staircase spiraling up into the darkness. "Hello?" she called out. Her voice echoed, sounding small and frightened. "In the library," a voice rasped. It was him. Samantha followed the sound toward the room with the orange glow. She pushed open the heavy double doors and stepped inside. The library was magnificent. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined every wall, filled with thousands of leather-bound volumes. A massive fireplace roared with life, casting long, dancing shadows across the Persian rugs. Sitting in a winged armchair by the fire was Matthew Collins. He was no longer wearing his suit jacket. He was in a silk dressing gown, looking older and more frail than he had in the restaurant. He held a glass of brandy in one hand and the same leather notebook in the other. He didn't look up. "You're late." I had to pick up my son," Samantha stammered, stepping further into the room. Water dripped from her hair onto the expensive rug. "Mr. Collins, I don't understand. The check, the note." "Did you deposit it?" he asked, finally looking at her. His eyes were still sharp, but the malice was gone, replaced by a weary intensity. "No. Banks are closed. But you have it. It's yours. Consider it severance pay for the job you lost tonight." "You got me fired on purpose," Samantha said, a flash of anger cutting through her fear. "You humiliated me. You made Gavin fire me just to— What? Get me here?" "I needed to know if you would break," Matthew said calmly. He gestured to the empty chair opposite him. "Sit." Samantha hesitated, then sat. The heat from the fire began to seep into her chilled bones. "I am a man with many enemies, Samantha," Matthew began, staring into the flames. "My board of directors wants me retired. My competitors want me bankrupt. And my children want me dead so they can liquidate my assets and buy islands in the Caribbean." He took a sip of brandy. "I have been looking for a personal assistant, a caretaker, someone to handle my private affairs. But I didn't want a professional. Professionals are trained to lie. They are trained to steal. I wanted someone hungry, someone desperate, someone who knows that loyalty is more valuable than gold because they've had neither." Samantha stared at him. "So you tested me?" "I tested 3 servers this week," Matthew admitted. "The first one spilled water when I yelled at him. He panicked. No backbone. The second one, a young man at a bistro, cursed me out when I left no tip. Too volatile." He turned his gaze to her. "But you took the abuse. You maintained your dignity, and when you saw the 0 tip, you didn't scream. You cried, yes. But you did your job. You cleared the table. You found the note." "I did it because I needed the job," Samantha said quietly. "I have a son who needs surgery. I couldn't afford to make a scene." "Exactly," Matthew said, slamming the notebook shut. "You have a why. People with a why are dangerous, Samantha. They are focused. They are resilient. You aren't working for a new purse or a vacation. You are working for survival. That makes you the most qualified person I've met in 10 years. He reached into his robe pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. He tossed it onto the small table between them. "That check for $10,000? Keep it. It's a signing bonus. In that envelope is an employment contract. The salary is $150,000 a year. Full benefits. Health insurance that covers, specifically, auditory specialists." Samantha's breath hitched. How do you know about the auditory specialist?" "I did my research before I sat at your table," Matthew said. "I don't leave things to chance." Samantha looked at the envelope. It was the answer to every prayer she had ever whispered in the dark. It was safety. It was Leo's hearing. It was a future. "What's the catch?" she asked. "There's always a catch." Matthew smiled, but it was a grim, wolfish expression. "The catch is that you are walking into a war zone, Samantha. My family is coming tomorrow for my 70th birthday. They are bringing lawyers. They intend to prove I am mentally unfit to manage the company. They want to put me in a home and take the keys to the kingdom." He leaned forward, his blue eyes burning. "I need a gatekeeper. I need someone to stand between me and the vultures. I need someone who can look a billionaire in the eye and lie without blinking, or tell them the truth so brutally it shatters them. I need you to be my proxy." "I'm a waitress," Samantha whispered. "Not anymore," Matthew said. "Tonight you are the most powerful woman in this city, if you choose to be. But you have to decide now. If you sign that paper, you stay. You and the boy move into the guest wing. You belong to the house." Samantha looked at the fire, then at the envelope. She thought of Gavin sneering at her. She thought of the eviction notices. She thought of Leo's silence. She reached out and took the envelope. The guest wing of the Collins estate was larger than the entire apartment complex Samantha had lived in for the last 5 years. By the time she had carried a sleeping Leo inside and tucked him into a bed with sheets that felt like woven clouds, it was past midnight. She didn't sleep. She spent the night reading the contract and the dossier Matthew had given her. It wasn't just a job offer. It was a battle plan. Matthew had outlined the profiles of his 3 children. Donovan, the eldest, a ruthless corporate shark who gambled with company stocks. Beatrice, a socialite who spent money faster than it could be printed. And Frederick, the youngest, who was easily manipulated by the other 2. Samantha memorized their faces. She memorized their weaknesses. When dawn broke, the storm had passed, leaving the sky a bruised purple and grey. Samantha showered in a marble bathroom that had more knobs than a spaceship, put on the tailored black suit Matthew had left for her, which fit perfectly, another terrifying detail of his preparation, and went downstairs. The house was waking up. Staff she hadn't seen the night before were dusting and polishing. They looked at her with curiosity, but no one stopped her. She was wearing the suit. She belonged. She found Matthew in the breakfast room. He was dressed in a sharp navy suit, but he looked pale. His hand shook slightly as he lifted his coffee cup. "Good morning," Samantha said, stepping into the room. "You stayed," Matthew said, not looking up from his newspaper. "Good. I signed the contract." She placed the signed papers next to his plate. "Leo is still sleeping. I met the nanny you hired. She seems capable. She was with the royal family in Monaco for 6 years. She'll do," Matthew grunted. "Now drink your coffee. They will be here in 20 minutes. "Who?" "The wolves." 20 minutes later, the crunch of tires on gravel announced the arrival. Samantha stood by the window and watched as 3 luxury cars, a Bentley, a Porsche, and a Mercedes G-Wagon, pulled up to the front entrance. Matthew remained seated at the head of the long dining table. "Remember your instructions, Samantha." "I remember," she said, her pulse racing. "I am your executive liaison. No one speaks to you without going through me. No one hands you papers unless I read them first." "Correct. And Samantha?" "Yes. Don't let them smell fear." The double doors of the dining room burst open. The 3 Collins children strode in like they owned the oxygen in the room. Leading the pack was Donovan. He was a tall man, handsome in a jagged way, with the same eyes as his father, but none of the depth. He wore a suit that shouted money. "Happy birthday, old man," Donovan boomed, his voice lacking any real warmth. He didn't move to hug his father. Instead, he threw a leather briefcase onto the table, rattling the fine china. Behind him, Beatrice, draped in fur despite the mild morning, smirked. Frederick trailed behind, looking at his phone. "Donovan," Matthew said icily, "you're early." "We have business to discuss, Dad," Donovan said, pulling out a chair and sitting down uninvited. "Big business. The board is meeting at noon. We need your signature on these transfer documents before then." "Transfer documents?" Matthew asked, cutting a piece of sausage. "Transferring what?" "Control," Beatrice piped up, examining her nails. "You're tired, Daddy. You've been slipping. We've all seen it. The outbursts, the forgetting of names, it's time to rest." We have a nice facility picked out in Zurich, Donovan added. Top of the line. Now, sign the papers. Donovan reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of legal documents. He slid them across the mahogany table toward his father. Matthew didn't move. He didn't even look at the papers. Donovan's jaw tightened. Dad, sign them, or we do this the hard way. We have testimony from your staff about your erratic behavior. Testimony? Matthew raised an eyebrow. Gavin, the manager at the Velvet Oak. Donovan smirked. He told us how you harassed a waitress last night, how you wrote insane notes on receipts. It paints a picture of dementia, Dad. A judge will grant us conservatorship by lunch. Samantha's blood ran cold. Gavin. Of course. Matthew still didn't speak. He just took a sip of coffee. Donovan slammed his hand on the table. Stop stalling. Look at the damn papers. I don't review paperwork during breakfast, Matthew said softly. My liaison handles all incoming documents. Donovan blinked. Your what? My liaison. Matthew pointed a shaking finger toward the corner of the room where Samantha was standing in the shadows. All three heads turned to look at her. Samantha stepped forward into the light. She kept her chin high, her face a mask of calm. Who is this? Beatrice asked, looking Samantha up and down with distaste. Some new nurse? My name is Samantha Reed, Samantha said, her voice clear and steady. I am Mr. Collins's executive liaison. All matters regarding his estate, his business, and his health are to be directed to me. Donovan laughed. It was a cruel, dismissive sound. A liaison? Dad, you hired a babysitter? Listen here, sweetheart. Take these papers and put them in front of him, or I'll have security throw you out. Samantha walked to the table. She didn't look at Matthew. She looked directly at Donovan. She reached out and picked up the stack of documents. Hey, Donovan barked. Careful with those. Samantha flipped through the first few pages. Power of attorney, asset liquidation, involuntary medical committal. She looked up at Donovan. These are very aggressive documents, Mr. Collins. They are necessary, Donovan snapped. Now give them to him. No, Samantha said. The room went dead silent. Frederick actually looked up from his phone. Excuse me? Donovan stood up, his face reddening. I said no, Samantha repeated, her voice hardening. Mr. Collins is enjoying his breakfast. Furthermore, as his liaison, I cannot allow him to sign legal documents under duress, and threatening him with a specialized facility in Zurich certainly qualifies as duress. You little... Donovan rounded the table, stepping into Samantha's personal space. He towered over her, using his height to intimidate. Do you know who I am? I can destroy you. I can make sure you never work in this city again. Samantha didn't flinch. She thought of the 0 tip. She thought of the get a real job note. She thought of Leo. I know exactly who you are, Donovan, Samantha said. You are the man who is trying to steal his father's company because you lost $40 million in a bad crypto gamble last month, and you need to cover your debts before the quarterly audit. Donovan froze. His face went ashen. How do you know that? Samantha didn't know it, but it was in the dossier Matthew had given her. Page 4, paragraph 2. And you, Samantha turned to Beatrice, you're pushing for this because your husband's real estate development in Dubai is collapsing, and you need a cash injection to stop the bank from seizing your penthouse. Beatrice gasped, clutching her pearls. Samantha turned back to Donovan. She dropped the heavy stack of papers onto the floor. Thud. Mr. Collins is perfectly sane, Samantha stated, and he is fully aware of your financial situations. If you proceed with this petition for conservatorship, I have been instructed to release the files on your Mismanagement to the board of directors. Today. Donovan looked at the papers on the floor, then at Samantha, and finally at his father. Matthew was smiling, a genuine, terrifying smile. "She's good, isn't she?" Matthew asked, buttering his toast. Donovan's hands were shaking. He had walked in expecting a confused old man. He had found a fortress. "This isn't over," Donovan hissed at Samantha. "You've made a powerful enemy today, Waitress. I know where you came from. Gavin told me everything. You're just a broke, single mum." "I am a mother," Samantha said, stepping closer to him, her eyes blazing. "Which means I know how to deal with tantrums. Get out." Donovan looked like he wanted to hit her, but he saw the security guards standing at the door, guards who reported to Matthew, not him. "Let's go," Donovan muttered to his siblings. He snatched his briefcase, leaving the papers on the floor. As they stormed out, the silence returned to the room. Samantha felt her knees go weak. She gripped the back of a chair to steady herself. Her heart was beating so fast she thought it might explode. Matthew Collins set down his knife. He picked up his napkin and wiped his mouth. "You missed a spot," he said. Samantha looked up, panicked. "What?" "On Donovan. You didn't mention his mistress in the Hamptons, but—" Matthew chuckled, a dry, raspy sound. The crypto debt was a much better hit. "Excellent work, Samantha." Samantha let out a long breath she didn't know she was holding. "Thank you, sir." "Don't get comfortable," Matthew warned, his expression turning serious again. "That was just the opening skirmish. Donovan is arrogant, but he isn't stupid. He will come back, and next time he won't come with papers. He'll come for you." Samantha looked at the door where the wolves had exited. She wasn't afraid anymore. She had faced the sharks and survived. "Let him come," Samantha said. Matthew nodded approvingly. "Now finish your coffee. We have a company to run." 3 weeks into her new role, Samantha Reed had transformed. The annual Collins Foundation Gala was her public debut, and the stakes were absolute. Standing in the center of the grand ballroom, she directed the chaos of florists and lighting technicians with the precision of a general. "The hydrangeas need to be fuller," she instructed, clutching her clipboard. "Mr. Collins prefers deep blues." "You're acting like you were born to this, Reed," a voice sneered. Samantha turned to see Beatrice Collins leaning against the doorway, sipping a green smoothie. "Enjoy it while it lasts," Beatrice said, walking in and inspecting a table setting with disgust. "My brother is unhappy. You humiliated him. When Daddy forgets you, and he will, we'll sweep you into the trash." Beatrice deliberately knocked a crystal vase off the table. It shattered loudly on the marble floor. "Oops," Beatrice deadpanned. "Clean that up. It's what you're good at, isn't it?" Samantha didn't flinch. She signaled a nearby porter. "Please clear this debris, and add the cost, $600, to Ms. Collins's personal expense account." Beatrice gasped, but Samantha had already turned back to her work, the petty harassment she could handle. The real attack, however, hit 4 hours before the doors opened. Samantha was in the kitchen checking the prep stations when Henry, the catering manager, called. His voice was frantic. "Ms. Reed, we have a problem. The order is gone." "Gone? What do you mean?" "We received an email from your account at 6 a.m. cancelling the entire event due to Mr. Collins's health. The staff is released. The supplies are gone." Samantha gripped the counter, the blood draining from her face. 6 a.m. She had been asleep. Someone had hacked her email. If 200 of the city's most powerful people arrived to an empty hall, it would prove Matthew was incompetent and Samantha was a failure. It was the ammunition Donovan needed. She ran to Matthew's study. He looked grave as she explained. "Donovan," he said darkly. "He knows the board is attending. If this event is a disaster, He'll call for a vote of no confidence tonight. I can fix this, Samantha said, a desperate idea forming. How? Matthew asked. You can't conjure a 5-course meal for 200 people in 3 hours. No, Samantha said, a spark lighting in her eyes. I can't get a Michelin star caterer, but I know people who can cook. She didn't call a luxury firm. She pulled out her personal phone and dialed the Velvet Oak, the Italian bistro down the street, and the best food truck in the district. She called in every favor from her 10 years in the service industry, the people the rich ignored, but who kept the city fed. When the guests arrived at 7 p.m., they weren't greeted by stiff, cold canapes. They walked into a culinary festival. There were stations of artisanal sliders, fresh handmade pasta tossed in giant parmesan wheels, and sushi chefs carving fresh tuna. The room was alive, vibrant, and smelled incredible. Donovan and Beatrice arrived late, wearing triumphant smirks, expecting to walk into a silent, foodless wake. Instead, they walked into the party of the year. "What is this?" Donovan hissed, grabbing a glass of champagne from a passing tray. "This," Matthew said, stepping up behind him, "is what competent management looks like." Samantha stood by Matthew's side in an emerald gown, looking every bit the executive. She leaned in close to Donovan so only he could hear. "You hacked my email," she said quietly. "You tried to starve your guests to make a point, but you forgot one thing." "And what's that?" Donovan snarled, eyeing the happy guests nervously. "I was a waitress for 10 years, Samantha said, her voice ice cold. "I know how to handle a rush." The evening was a victory. The board members were impressed, and the donation checks flowed. But as the night wound down, Samantha noticed Donovan wasn't leaving. He was standing in a shadowy corner with a man in a trench coat, a man who looked distinctly out of place at a black tie gala. Samantha felt a shiver of dread cut through her triumph. The food sabotage had been too easy. It was just a distraction. The real trap was about to spring. The music had faded, and the last guests were gone. The house was quiet, but the air felt heavy. In the library, Matthew reviewed the donation totals with a satisfied sigh. $3 million, he said. "A record. You saved the night, Samantha. That quick thinking with the local chefs was brilliant." "I just did what I had to do," Samantha replied, smiling tiredly. But Donovan, he looked too calm when he left. He wasn't angry enough. "Donovan is a snake," Matthew muttered. "He waits in the grass." Suddenly, the heavy double doors burst open. Detective Miller, a man in a cheap suit, entered with 3 uniformed officers. Behind them, wearing a mask of tragic concern, was Donovan. "Mr. Collins," Miller said, flashing a badge. "We have a warrant for Samantha Reed." The room seemed to tilt. "Me?" Samantha gasped. "For what?" "Grand larceny and corporate espionage," Miller recited. Donovan stepped forward, shaking his head sadly. "I didn't want to believe it, Dad. But the accounting team flagged a transfer today. $200,000 moved from the foundation directly into Samantha's personal account." "That's a lie," Samantha screamed. "I never touched that money." "We also found this," Miller said, holding up an evidence bag containing a flash drive. "Found in her purse, in the coat check. It contains proprietary engine schematics. A rival firm in China paid a deposit for these this morning." Samantha stared at the bag in horror. "That's not mine. Someone put that there." She turned frantically to the old man. "Matthew, you know I wouldn't do this." Matthew looked at the evidence bag, then at Donovan's sorrowful face, and finally at Samantha. His expression was unreadable, a mask of stone. He gripped his cane until his knuckles turned white, but he said nothing. "Sir," Samantha whispered, tears filling her eyes. "Please." Miller grabbed Samantha's wrist, spinning her around. The cold steel of the handcuffs clicked shut, echoing like a gunshot in the quiet room. "You have the right to remain silent," Miller began. As they marched her out, Samantha looked back. Matthew hadn't moved. He stood by the fire, watching her go, offering no defense. Donovan stood beside him, and as Samantha was dragged past, a slow, cruel smile broke his facade. He mouthed 2 words to her. Game over. Outside, the rain had returned. As the squad car doors slammed shut, panic clawed at Samantha's throat, not for herself, but for Leo, sleeping upstairs in a house now controlled by wolves. She had thought she was the queen protecting the king, but she realized too late she was just a pawn. Inside the library, Donovan poured himself a brandy, the picture of relief. "I told you, Dad," he said, swirling the amber liquid. "She was trash, just a grifter looking for a payday." Matthew stared into the fire. The silence stretched for a long minute. "The IP address," Matthew said finally, his voice raspy. "What?" "You said the transfer came from her laptop inside the house," Matthew said, turning slowly to face his son. "Yes. The IT guys traced her IP. Samantha's laptop connects to the guest Wi-Fi," Matthew said. "The Foundation's banking server is on a separate, hard-wired, secure line. It is physically impossible to access the banking portal from the guest network. I set up that firewall myself 10 years ago." Donovan's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Well, she must have hacked the main router. She's clever." "Is she?" Matthew's eyes narrowed into slits. "Clever enough to hack a military-grade firewall, but stupid enough to leave the flash drive in her purse in a public coat check?" Donovan shrugged, feigning indifference. "Criminals make mistakes." "Yes," Matthew whispered, the firelight catching the hard edge of his jaw. "They do." He walked past his son, heading for the door. "Where are you going?" Donovan asked. "To bed," Matthew lied. He wasn't going to bed. He was going to the security room in the basement. He was going to pull the footage from the coat check, and he was going to make a phone call to the one judge in the city who owed him a life debt. Samantha was in a cell, cold and alone. But the war wasn't over. They had taken his protector, and in doing so, they had woken the wolf. 72 hours. That was how long Samantha had been in the county detention center. 72 hours of grey walls, cold food, and the crushing weight of knowing that while she sat there, her son was in the custody of strangers. Her lawyer, a weary public defender named Mr. Katz, offered no hope before the hearing. "The evidence is damning, Samantha," he said, shuffling his files. "The flash drive, the bank transfer. The Collinses are pushing for maximum sentencing. They want to make an example of you." "I didn't do it," Samantha whispered, her voice hoarse. "Donovan framed me." "Proving that," Katz sighed, "is the hard part." The courtroom was a spectacle. Cameras flashed as Samantha was led in, handcuffed and wearing an orange jumpsuit that seemed to strip away the last shreds of her dignity. She scanned the room desperately. In the front row, Donovan and Beatrice sat like grieving royalty. Donovan wore a black suit, playing the part of the betrayed son perfectly. Beatrice refused to even look at her, but the seat next to them was empty. Matthew wasn't there. Samantha's heart shattered. He had believed them. The man who had seen her potential, who had given her the key to the kingdom, had abandoned her when it mattered most. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. Judge Whitman, a man with a reputation for harsh sentences, peered over his glasses. The prosecutor didn't waste time, painting Samantha as a master manipulator who had embezzled $200,000 and stolen corporate secrets. Donovan stood up, interrupting the proceedings with feigned outrage. She is a con artist who preyed on an elderly man. She manipulated my father and tried to destroy our legacy. Sit down, Mr. Collins, the judge warned, though he looked sympathetic. He turned his gaze to Samantha. Given the gravity of the corporate theft, bail is set at $500,000. Samantha closed her eyes. It was over. She would stay in jail until trial. She would lose Leo. Clack, clack, clack. The sound of a heavy cane hitting the floor echoed from the back of the room. "I object," a gravelly voice boomed. Every head turned. Standing there, flanked not by nurses, but by two high-priced lawyers and the chief of police, was Matthew Collins. He wasn't frail. He wasn't bedridden. He was standing tall, his eyes burning with a cold blue fire. "Mr. Collins," Judge Whitman looked stunned. "I apologize for the interruption," Matthew declared, marching down the center aisle. "But I couldn't sit by while an innocent woman was framed in my own house." Donovan's face went white. He scrambled up. "Dad, what are you doing here? You should be resting." "Sit down, Donovan," Matthew snapped. The authority in his voice was so absolute that Donovan collapsed back into his chair. Matthew reached the defense table and looked at Samantha. For the first time in 3 days, he smiled, a small, apologetic expression. Then he turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I am submitting new evidence into the record." Exhibit A. Security footage from the coat check room at the gala. A blind spot in the old system, but my son forgot that I had the security upgraded the day Samantha was hired. On the large courtroom monitor, the video played. It was grainy but unmistakable. Donovan Collins reaching into Samantha's purse, pulling out a flash drive, and dropping it inside. He looked around guiltily before walking away. The courtroom erupted. The press went wild. "And Exhibit B," Matthew continued, his voice cutting through the noise. "My son claims the money was transferred from Samantha's laptop. While the IP address was spoofed, the device used to initiate the transfer was a tablet registered to Beatrice Collins." Beatrice shrieked, jumping to her feet. "Donovan told me to do it. He said it was just a prank." "Silence!" The judge banged his gavel. Donovan turned on his sister, his composure cracking. "Shut up, you idiot! It's a setup. The old man is senile. He doctored the footage." Matthew turned to his son. He didn't shout. He didn't rage. He simply looked at him with profound, icy disappointment. "I built this empire on instincts, Donovan. I knew you were greedy. I knew you were impatient. But I never thought you were sloppy." Matthew stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You didn't just try to frame my employee. You tried to frame the woman who saved my company. You are no longer my son. You are a liability." Matthew nodded to the chief of police. "Chief, execute the warrant." Officers moved in, bypassing Samantha and heading straight for the front row. "Donovan Collins, Beatrice Collins," the chief announced, pulling out handcuffs. "You are under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and filing a false police report." "No! You can't do this!" Donovan screamed as he was slammed against the railing. "I own this city! Dad, stop them!" Matthew turned his back on his children. He looked at the judge. "Your Honor, I request the immediate dismissal of all charges against Ms. Reed. I will pay her legal fees, and if I may, give her a ride home." Judge Whitman looked at the chaos, then at the undeniable video evidence on the screen. He banged his gavel with finality. "Case dismissed. Ms. Reed, you are free to go." The bailiff unlocked the handcuffs. Samantha rubbed her wrists, tears streaming down her face, tears of relief, shock, and vindication. She looked at Matthew as the police dragged his screaming children out of the courtroom. "You knew? You knew the whole time?" I suspected, Matthew said softly, offering her a handkerchief. But suspicions don't hold up in court. I needed them to act. I needed them to think they had won so they would get careless. I had to let them arrest you to catch them. For that, Samantha, I am truly sorry. Samantha looked at the old man, seeing the heavy burden he carried, the weight of having to destroy his own blood to do what was right. She didn't feel anger, only gratitude. "Take me to my son," she whispered, 6 months later. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Collins Industries executive suite on the 40th floor. Samantha Reed sat behind a desk made of reclaimed glass and steel, signing a stack of documents. She wasn't wearing an apron. She was wearing a bespoke, cream-colored suit. Her title on the brass plaque on the door read, Chief Operations Officer. "Samantha?" She looked up. Matthew walked in. He looked healthier than he had in years. The stress of his toxicity-filled home life was gone. Donovan and Beatrice were currently serving 3-year sentences in a minimum security facility, and Frederick had been sent to a rehabilitation center in Switzerland, where he was finally getting help. "The board meeting starts in 10 minutes, Matthew said. "Are you ready?" "Born ready," Samantha smiled. "Good, because after the meeting, you have an appointment." "I do?" Samantha checked her calendar. "I don't see anything." "It's a personal appointment," Matthew said, his eyes twinkling. "Dr. Aris called. Leo's post-op checkup is today. He said the cochlear implants are fully settled." Samantha's hand went to her heart. The surgery had been 2 months ago. Today was the activation day. They took the helicopter to the hospital. When they walked into the audiologist's office, Leo was sitting on the exam table, swinging his legs, holding a toy dinosaur. Samantha knelt in front of him. She signed to him. "Ready?" Leo nodded, his eyes wide. The doctor adjusted the small device behind Leo's ear. He typed something into his computer. "Okay, Samantha. Speak to him. Just a normal volume." Samantha's throat felt tight. She reached out and held Leo's small hands. "Leo?" she whispered. "Hi, baby." Leo's eyes went wide. He froze. He looked at the doctor, then back at his mother. A slow, confused, beautiful smile spread across his face. "Mama," he said. The word was slurred, imperfect, but it was the most beautiful sound Samantha had ever heard. She burst into tears, pulling him into a hug. "Yes, baby. It's Mama. I'm here." Matthew stood in the doorway, watching them. He wiped a single tear from his cheek with his knuckle. Later that evening, back at the estate, Samantha found a small package on her desk. It was wrapped in the same linen napkin from that first rainy night at the Velvet Oak. She opened it. Inside was a framed object. It was the original receipt, the one with the $0 tip. But Matthew had taken a pen and added something to it. Underneath the jagged, "Get a real job," he had written a new date and a new note. "You found it. You run the company now. I'm retiring to the vineyard. P." Samantha laughed, tracing the words with her finger. She looked out the window at the city lights below. She had started with nothing but a tray and a dream for her son. Now, she had everything. She picked up her phone and called down to the kitchen. "This is Samantha," she said. "Mr. Collins and I will be dining in tonight. And please, tell the staff to take the rest of the night off. I'll cook." Because sometimes, to do the real job, you have to remember where you started. Samantha Reed proved that dignity isn't defined by your bank account, and strength isn't measured by how loud you shout, but by how long you can stand your ground when the world tries to break you. Matthew Collins taught us that sometimes a $0 tip isn't an insult. It's a challenge to demand what you are truly worth. In a world full of Donovans, be a Samantha. Be resilient, be kind, and never let anyone tell you that you don't belong. If this story touched your heart, or if you believe in karma coming back around, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to share this video with someone who needs a reminder to never give up, and subscribe with notifications on so you never miss a story that matters. What would you have done if you found that note? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.